Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam, and I'll be your moderator. We're joined by Dr. Jeff and Pat Carter. They will discuss how to maximize return on investment and enhance quality of life by emphasizing ergonomics for design. If at any point you have a question, please type it into the box labeled "Have a Question," and we'll conduct live Q&A at the end. If you'd like to chat with other attendees, navigate to your control panel at the bottom of your screen and click the chat icon. And lastly, Midmark is sponsoring tonight's webinar. All right, Carters, take it away.
Well, thank you, Adam. Thank you so much for organizing this. And everybody, welcome to Ergonomics by Design, Floor Plan, Technology Integration, and Treatment Room Solutions. We're thrilled to have you here today with us, Pat.
Yes,
and I'm really looking forward to spending the next hour with you. So, Pat, we're going to focus on, floor plans, on operatories, on the clinical zone of the office. But just to everybody keep in mind, it's still in the whole of an entire functioning office. As important as that zone is, it has to work in conjunction with the other parts and pieces of the office.
Yeah.
So we're going to touch on some of that stuff. And like I said, the biggest problems we see are actually in the public zone, not the clinical zone, because it's less well understood.
So we're going to have some Revit modeling. This is one that you're seeing right now, and that's a design tool that we use in design that allows us to take two-dimensional information and show it to our clients in three-dimension, because quite frankly, we understand looking at a two-dimensional drawing is very difficult. But what hopefully it's showing you as you tour this office that you're looking at, it shows you the concept of flow, of sizing, of cabinetry configuration, etc. So it allows you to see what is shown again in a drawing that is a little difficult to understand and how it will feel when you walk through the office. And Jeff, you're absolutely right. When it comes to ergonomics, it's not just the operatory, it's not just the sterilization areas, those considerations and the flow in the clinical space. We do want to emphasize as we go through the floor plan that it's the public zone as well that gets discussed very rarely, that also has to connect to that treatment zone in an optimum way.
So let's talk about some design principles, Pat, the things that drive floor plans, that drive workflow, all the things that lead to proper ergonomics. So really, first and foremost are square footage and zoning. Let's talk about square footage. And many of you out there, you've probably heard this, and we've been saying this for many, many years. But to arrive at ideal square footage for your office, you take the number of operatories times 500 square feet. So a 5-operatory office, ideally, optimally, is housed in 2,500 square feet. A 10-operatory office, we would love to have 5,000 square feet. And that's a optimalize, a starting point. People ask us all the time, Pat, how can I future-proof my office? We go all this investment, all this time and energy to create a new office. Well, what if in 5 years it doesn't work at all? Well, the number one way to do that is take optimal square footage now. So if your office is undersized, if the rooms are already under pressure now, in 5 to 10 years, they're going to be a mess. I mean, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult to alleviate a lot of those issues. So that's one, taking optimal square footage. So all of you that are pondering any kind of project remodel, new ground up building, lease, but take the number of ops times 500 square feet. That's your starting point, somewhere around there, somewhere around that square footage.
And the second design principle is what we call zoning. So zoning is actually a design principle that we've been taught as designers and architects in school. So it's a way of organizing spaces that have common function. A zone is a group of spaces that have common function. The idea being that you organize them together. If they're organized together, you have improved the efficiency, the flow, the access to spaces. Sometimes it's referred to as adjacencies. So in the dental office, while other projects may have 5 zones, may have 7 zones, may have 2 zones, in the dental office we have 3 zones, 3 distinct functioning zones. The first of which is public. So the public is the entry point for patients that come in, the interaction of staff for before treatment and after treatment. So in a way, we talk about this in terms of it's the nexus of the project, because it has to receive patients coming from the out of doors, and it has to receive patients coming from the clinical zone as well. The next zone is the clinical zone. So all the spaces associated with treatment are organized in the zone. When we talk about zones, when you're looking at your floor plan, or any floor plan that might be issued to you, you're wanting to see all of that color, if you will, as it's shown in red here, together, that there's no interruption of a yellow space or a blue space, which would be a different zone. If you get an interruption in the floor plan, that's an indication that you've got an inefficiency, or it's at least worth a conversation about why that space is showing up there. The last zone is private zone. So the private zone are all those spaces associated with staff and with doctors or providers. It is not a patient use space. Although we've had projects where, for instance, a staff area might be available to the community and they may have access to a staff area. But in the operation of the dental office during the day, that's how those spaces are organized. You notice we have two plans. We have two plans. We have a plan on the left that is 7 operatories. We have a plan on the right that is 7 operatories. They are distinctly different in their organization of spaces, although when you look at them zoning-wise, all the yellow is together, all the red is together, and all the blue is together. That does indicate that they're well zoned as far as the organization of spaces. But they are also an indication of what the difference between optimum square footage, which is the one on the left, the 3,500 square feet, versus undersized and all the compromises that may create for a space, which is, 2,150 square feet.
Well, and we did the plan on the left, Pat, the,
yes.
The optimized plan on the right. I pulled off the internet late at night, but I punched in 7 GP office, and that came up, and it's just really we talked about the square footage optimization of your space. It's just that it's very difficult when you're that far undersized. It's just all of the issues we're going to look at, probably 95% of them are from being undersized, from not taking optimal, adequate square footage.
And that's what we want to show. We want to show this comparison. We think it's the best way, because we agree it's difficult, unless you're used to looking at floor plans day in and day out, to understand. As long as I see a waiting area, I assume it works well. As long as I see a front desk, I assume it works well. But there are things that we want to point out in comparing these two to show you why a floor plan may work efficiently and well, and why another may not. So looking at the public zone, the door is down sheet. So if you come in as a patient, we're going to start with the one on the left, the optimized floor plan. I can come into the room called the waiting space. Off to my right is all the seating. I can walk straight to the front desk or the greeting desk without going through seating, without interrupting anybody who's in the waiting area. Notice the one on the right, the slide on the right or the image on the right. I am walking through seating. I'm going to a greeting desk. That is making me feel like I've interrupted, that I've gone through a space and interrupted the activities of that space. So you also have that feeling everybody's looking at you. So what we would say about that in organizing a waiting area, for instance, in the public zone, you want to have all the seating segregated off to the right or off to the left, where you don't feel like you're walking through and interrupting that flow. And that feels better to people who are entering the space. Also notice the seating distance between the image on the left, if I'm seating in a waiting area to the front desk, versus the one on the right. The one on the right, you've got a chair that's within 2 feet of that front desk area. That's really tight. That's very close. That's not comfortable. Another significant difference between these two is the orientation and the receiving desk area of the reappointing. So on the left, you see 2 people stationed. And for a 7 operatory office, 2 doctors practicing, you're going to want to have 2 stations for people receiving patients. Notice it has 2 individuals with 6-foot run of counter, nice space. They have division. There's a dividing wall between them. So when I walk up as a patient, we have some nice privacy there. To the right, we have a slide. We have an image where we have a front desk, 1 person seated there or to receive all the people that are going to be coming from 7 ops. So if you've been experiencing a bottleneck or places where patients stack up against the front desk, that's exactly the issue. There wasn't enough space delivered to the reappointing desk. So you always have to be thinking in terms of the front desk supports clinical, correct? So the clinical operatories need to have enough square footage to allow for people to staff the area of production. A couple of other things, the consultation space, the one on the left, has 2 doctors, space for 2 individuals that can come in with the doctor, and also a reappointing or a treatment coordinator or somebody that might help administer. That is up sheet in the middle of the image on the left. We also have a toilet that's oriented away from the front desk and gives people some hiding, if you will, to go use that toilet. they're not in full view, versus the one on the right. We have a consultation room where one doctor, one person can get in there. It's very tight, it's very concise. The toilet is positioned right across from the front desk. If you've ever had that situation, the feedback we've gotten from individuals over time is you never want to have that toilet right across from the front desk, just based on sounds or odors or all the things that can happen out of the toilet. I don't know how else to say it. So I just did. So the public zone we've examined, and the issues that we've just described are simply a result of not having enough square footage. So that's why we emphasize that issue. But let's look at the clinical area, Jeff.
And so right now we're much more focused on the clinical zone in this webinar. So look at the plan on the left. So the 7 ops and the idealized 7 ops times 500 square feet, 3,500 square feet. And this is a classic kind of textbook layout of operatories. So in this, this is actually a building, but the operatories up sheet or up towards the top part of the plan, those are all facing north. We love north-facing windows because we get natural light, no direct sun. If you look at those, that's what we call dual head entry operatories. We have 4 of them. When we trap a corner, we actually trap a corner, we can flip an op and create a quiet op, and we'll show you that later on in the operatory section. And we have a couple of ops down sheet, and then a centralized sterilization area. But that's just a classic layout. We often say the layout of the operatories mirrors the instrument processing run in the sterilization area. We have an L-shaped operatory configuration. We have a reciprocal L-shaped instrument processing run in the sterilization area. Great place for imaging. You can see imaging. So variably, ops get sort of deemed hygiene versus doctor ops. So in this plan, the first 2 ops you come to across from imaging are hygiene, which does in this office does the majority of imaging. They'll take records, do imaging, then take people in for a hygiene recall appointment. We have a great lab. Look at the size of the lab in the plan on the left. We have a parking lot above the lab for the digitization of dentistry. We've got all kinds of even more and more mobile units. We need to place them somewhere. We need to put outlets to charge them. And then this doctor even has a CAD-CAM niche, an exposed CAD-CAM niche that displays 3D printers, milling units. He has a design station. He stores cases in there. But just it's open to show off to patients as they go, wow, look at this place. These are really some state-of-the-art people. But, I wish all of us could have that 7-op office on the right. That's just a wonderful configuration. On the left, sorry. Not on the right, sorry. On the left. But it's just a wonderful configuration. And, 95% of us taking adequate square footage to be able to house that. The plan on the right, if we look at that, we got similar versions and miniaturized, combinations of what's going on the left. But look at the ops on the plan on the right. 7 ops, 2150 square feet. We're undersized by 1,350 square feet, under optimal. That puts all kinds of pressure on the space. So the ops almost all of them are somewhat different. They have different entry points. Some have side cabinets, some have 1 side cabinet, some have 2. It just, when you go into an op, if they're all different or slight, that's tough on workflow, that's tough on ergonomics. You're like, okay, I'm in op number 3 and that's over here. So it's a result of trying to get more operatory function into a smaller space. Look at the sterilization on the plan on the right. That's not enough. For 7 ops, that's not enough of lineal countertop for instrument processing. You really need anywhere from 14 to 16 lineal feet. We're under that. We're under that. The imaging, so on the plan on the right, the imaging areas, and we've even done this, but it's in an alcove. It's in an alcove off of an operatory corridor. So if somebody goes by there, you got to stop them. If you're running the unit and you have a 6-foot airspace clearance, so you don't get zapped by photons, you're going to have to stop people. Well, it's just, maybe it's a few times a day, but that's just an unnecessary nuisance you don't need to really interject in your office. And then the lab, the plan on the right, the lab is the same size as the bathroom, as the toilet, so I guess it's, it's the same size as an ADA toilet, which seems huge to some people, but that's a teeny tiny lab for 7 ops. And, maybe they're not saying I'm not doing any lab stuff, but it's just so undersized in comparison.
We would agree that the lab is an area based on the type of dentistry and procedures that they're doing. But that is quite undersized.
And I would say, look at the plan on the right, Pat, the 2 corner ops in the top right-hand corner and the bottom right-hand corner. Those are what we call single head entry. That is one of the worst operatory configurations for flow because if you're in both of those, if you're the operator and you're right-handed, you can get in. If you're the assistant, you get in there first, you get way on the other side of the chair goes back. You can't get out of the room. You have to go all the way around to put in. And really, if you have a chair with a junction box, there's not a lot of space at that.
You're hopping over that.
Well, yeah, you're hopping over
Highly
the end of the chair.
inefficient.
So it's just, yeah, it's an inefficient setup. And really, all of that's from lack of square footage. They're just trying to make something, put too much in too
But
small
wait,
space.
there's more. We have a private zone. So the private zone, in conditions where we have, and we realize you can't always get the optimum square footage for whatever number of reasons, whether it's a lease space that just doesn't have quite enough, but it's the best location, et cetera. We understand that, and we work in those circumstances. What we generally would do then is the private space would be, or zone, would be that area that gets compromised. So the spaces become smaller. They may not get all the optimum bells and whistles within their view because they are the least, I guess, important. Our objective is always to make that public and that clinical zone work as optimally as possible, and then whatever space is left over is the private zone. Well, we're going to look at this same image again. So the private zone for the 3,500 square foot office, we have a staff of 12 to 14 people with 2 doctors. So we have a staff area that's tabling and allowing for that level of staff to have morning huddles, et cetera, in the kitchen area. They also have lockers. They have a changing area along with the dental mechanical. They have a staff toilet. It's all positioned there, and we parceled it out of the general overall plan just to show it to you. So that's the staff toilet. We also have 2 doctors that are working in here, and they want to work at the same time. So we've got a doctor's office that allows for 2 doctors to work. They also have a convening area behind their desk or on the other side of the room where they can convene, share diagnoses, et cetera. They have their own toilet, which Jeff will tell you. You would think that any doctor should have a separate toilet from the staff, and I wouldn't disagree. You need to have that.
Especially as you get older, you're really going to appreciate that private.
Duly noted. So, and then notice we also have the bulk storage. We have a bulk storage area that's pretty ample for supporting, obviously, the needs of the overall office there. Now let's look at this one on the right. On the right, we do have a staff area. We do have a kitchenette, but we have seating for 6, so that's half of the staff. The rest would be standing up around the walls, if you will, if we're using it as a huddle space. We do have a toilet, so we do have access off of the corridor for the staff toilet. There is a difference in the configuration. Maybe I should say something. So that toilet that's on the right, that's your typical ADA toilet with a wall-hung sink hanging off the wall and a toilet. The one on the left, which is the more optimally sized or configured ADA toilet, it has a full counter for use by staff. You can have a big mirror along with the toilet, and that will satisfy ADA as well. Looking at the doctor's office, it's a single doctor's office. I just mentioned we're going to have 2 doctors in this office, we would assume, for 7 operatories, and we have a space for 1 doctor or for 2 doctors to share 1 desk. It's a very undersized office situation. They have no toilet. They have no major bulk storage. So you can see some of the things that were eliminated or hugely compromised because, again, of square footage.
So Pat, so our design principles taking adequate square footage and zoning. So what else do we want to talk about in relation to that? So let's talk about equipment and technology, our design criteria. So what does that mean? When we say something's a design criteria, what does that mean in the design?
It has programming attached to it. So there's reasons for the solution. So design criteria is the rationale for the solution. So when you have a problem or a concern or objective, design should solve that.
Well, so equipment and technology are a big part of that. So they're a tool, right. They're a design tool just like a door is, a wall would be, a cabinet, a ceiling flooring design. So let's look at these, everybody watching. Now look at these images here. So we got 3 images. These are all by our friends at Midmark configurations. But look at this operatory on the left. So it looks kind of subtle. It's just another operatory. Well, there's actually a lot going on there. So we've got some, I think these are synthesis cabinetry, but we've got fixed sink cabinets that are actually mounted above the floor. We love that look. It's a nice clean look. It's great for flooring installation. But in ergonomically, you're not using that lower drawer when you have a base cabinet on the floor and you have a drawer that's what, 8 inches off the floor, sometimes that's not a very useful item. So that's a nice look. We have infection control dispensers above the fixed sink cabinets. But then on the left, on our left in this image, we have a mobile pedestal, a mobile drawer stack, versus maybe in the past we would fix that drawer stack. But that's mobile, that moves around, and it's a result of just this proliferation of modular mobile units. On the right, this is highly customized for a doctor, a specific doctor, but there's a storage tower for the assistant. So this doctor wanted to store more in this operatory, not have to run out for expanded procedures and grab additional materials and supplies. And then if you look at the upper right, so there's some things happening, folks, that we're seeing trends. Pat and I have been doing this long enough. We're seeing kind of an evolution where we're coming back to some things we did many, many years ago and experimenting with them again. But if you look at this image in the upper right-hand corner, so we have a doctor or doctor-operator who's in this operatory that we're looking in the left. But so the operator, the doctor, the dentist is now surrounded by actually three working surfaces in the same plane, in addition to working in the oral cavity. And it's the assistant. If you look at the assistant in this image, she is there with the suction just kind of sitting back, and the doctor is in the process of accessing these different surfaces, which is the complete polar opposite of sort of how I was trained, and we'll get into that more in another section. But how we were trained, where assistants we maximize the use of assistants accessing past surfaces, passing stuff to us to take the strain off the operator. We're seeing a reversal of that for many reasons. I think there's many reasons why that's showing up, and we're going to talk more about that later. But there's some interesting trends, and then technology. My gosh, everything's got a computer chip in it somehow, attaches to a monitor, and it's just, it's wonderful, but it's a big part of everything. If your IT system goes down, you can't even put on a patient napkin if you wanted to without IT.
But it's all about integration. So integration becomes key. When you're designing a dental office, it isn't an afterthought. Equipment needs to be thought through. It is integrated with technology. Most equipment that you're purchasing has integrated technology. So all of that goes into the design of any dental office.
So let's look at So Pat, anybody pondering something out there? So we're talking about equipment and technology or design criteria. So you're going to do something to your office. You're watching this, our little webinar, and you're like, well, maybe I'm doing a new office. Maybe I just need to retrofit a couple of offices. But you need help. Dental is really deemed a medical facility. You trigger all the regulations, all the things that have to happen. So who are people that can help you upfit, retrofit your existing office, maybe help you with a new office? What kind of team does it take there?
And we get a lot of questions about that. So just to speak to that directly, there's typically an architect involved, especially with full buildings. You have to have an architect stamp seal for securing permit. They also take responsibility for the building shell, if you will. An interior designer that would work with them, that for the most part is developing the interior of the space, whether it's an interior lease space, whether it's a full building, and they work in collaboration. And then there's those engineers that are going to be associated with it. The dental designer that we're listing is somebody like a Jeff, like somebody like your dental rep, like your equipment supplier. Those who are going to be very familiar with equipment, they should be part of the team. It's one of the reasons why we suggest to dentists, and we suggest to you as well, you make the decision of who's going to be part of the dental equipment team member before you or as you go into design. The engineers, MEP engineering is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. You'll be requiring them for permit purposes. The structural engineer and the civil engineer are going to be part of the team once you are doing the full building.
Okay, so that's good. So Pat, so with our previous video, and a lot of the point was, your manufacturer reps, your people like Midmark, your equipment specialists, your people with Henry Schein, they're part of your design team. And on every single project we do, we work in close partnership with both of them, and we need their help and we need their support. And they can program that design criteria for you as it relates to equipment and technology. So that was part of showing that video. So now let's talk about operatory designs more. Let's get a little more focused on that and a little more specific. So Pat and I wrote that it was March of 2022. This is an article we did in Dental Economics. So we'd written an article, I think, in 2012. about what's the, how large is the ideal operatory. Really, when people ask us design questions after the second or third question after how much does this stuff cost is, how large is the ideal, how big is the ideal operatory. So in 2012, we had an operatory was about 10.5 by 11.9 deep, I think. So they asked us to update this article. So after 10 years, we added 3 inches to the length. Because of various things that happened. People got taller, longer, wider. So the point was that, it's the footprint is held relatively stable over the years, but what's changed is the customization. The customization of operatories based on how doctors practice their unique clinical mix of procedures. So all of you don't do the same thing. I remember when I practiced, I wasn't a huge fan of dentures. That wasn't my favorite thing to do. Some of you might love dentures, but you have got GPs that take extra training to place implants. They do maybe Invisalign, but you need to design to your specific procedural mix to really augment and support you through your practice to take off. So you can read this article. So all of you that are mostly what is it, high C's, high content people?
Yes.
What is the DISC test?
Yes.
High content people that can't get enough information when more and more back. We'll read this sometime late at night, but it's a DE. You can pull it up, March of 2022. How large is the ideal operatory? Pat, you're going to say something.
The next.
The next.
If you'll give it to me.
If I will get to the next image.
So
okay.
what do we mean by an ideal operatory? So design criteria from our standpoint, from our viewpoint, are going to be these following considerations. Should be configured to promote ergonomic and efficient workflow for both the seated and the standing position, because that's something we're starting to see in a trend. We've got dentists that are starting to stand at the chair as well as seat themselves at the chair. It should support right and left-handed. We've been saying that for years, but the reality of what projects that we're seeing coming to us, it's going to be mixed use, mixed providers that may show up as right and left-handed. So it becomes more and more important, especially for GPs. Another trend that we're seeing is they bring in specialists, and the specialists themselves may be right or left-handed counter to you. So if you have operatories that allow for both, you're going to be optimizing the efficiency. You'll obviously need to have wheelchair access. The ADA, the American with Disabilities Act, is going to require that. Every operatory must be accessible. For us as designers, we like natural light, so big windows or as much window exposure as you can create, not only in operatories, but in other spaces of the office. Sometimes we create it through clerestories. If we can't do it in the building shell, we'll do it up high to bring light in, because it creates comfortable and positive experiences for both your patients and your staff. And last, what's the big thing we're seeing a lot? Mobile pedestals. The mobile carts that are needing to come in and out of operatories and be able to convene themselves in various operatories. So we need to allow for those in an optimum op.
So let's look at operatory design option number 1, Pat. So this is held for many, many years. Like I said, we added 3 inches to it after 10 years. But essentially 10.5 wide inside finished face of sheetrock, 12 feet deep from foot end of the operatory to the back of the treatment console or the front, the operatory side of a stud wall, finished face of a stud wall. But basically, just if you can remember, 10.5 by 12 feet deep. Any kind of configuration will fit in there of typical standards. But look at this graphic on the left. That shows you how we build some of those dimensions. So just as Pat said, we're meeting criteria. The rear consoles are 22 to 24 inches deep. I literally had a 1-hour conversation with a mid-mark guy the other day on how did we come up with the 24 to 30 inch range between the tip of the headrest and the front face of the treatment console. And it's based on where you sit, what clock position you sit in, how big are you, how far do you pull out the headrest, how far under the dental chair can you slide your knees, do you rotate the dental chair from perfectly perpendicular, do you rotate it to like 11 o'clock so you can sit closer to 12 o'clock? There's all kinds of variables in there where you can fine tune it. And that's part of working with like a Henry Schein or a Midmark when they're reps to fine tune the equipment configuration. We can get it in the footprint. We can design the footprint for you, but you also customize it within that configuration. And exactly how far the tip of that headrest comes in relation to that back cabinet is specifically, based on you, how you practice, how big you are. Really one of the one of the nightmare scenarios, Pat, is where you have people in offices where someone's 5'1", and one operator's 5'1", and the other one's 6'8" or something.
You've got to make it work for both.
Interesting discrepancies, so you got to get in kind of a middle range. But that's how you build the dimensions. If you look at the operatory on the lower right-hand corner, that's an exact depiction of what's shown in that schematic above. So we have fixed sink cabinets, we have infection control dispenser cabinets above the sink cabinets, and then we have two modular drawer stacks on casters that can be pulled in and out as needed per specific procedures. The upper right-hand corner, we have a more customized. There's actually more cabinetry on the assistant's left side if you're a right-handed operator. And that's taking that footprint and taking it a couple steps further because you want a little more storage there. Here's a great looking example of operatory design option 1, 10.5 wide, 12 feet deep. Now this is in a lease space. So, we do a lot of buildings and we love a building can be optimized. It can be, if you need the square footage, you can, typically you can get it there. Well, this is a lease space. If you look at this, the windows never quite line up, but this is a lovely operatory. Everybody'd love to have those two windows and a hilltop view out into this wonderful scenery. But look at how this is set up. So this is ideally configured for a right-handed operator. So the mobile cabinet, so on the lower right, there's our mobile drawer stack that used to be fixed, is now mobile. That's on the left side, that's on the assistant side. If you look closely at the picture, that's the secondary layout space for the assistant. So I have a composite gun, I've got some other materials set up over there ready to go. The round disc is my primary assisting surface with my primary instrument cassette placed on this round disc, the primary assisting surface, but completely set up. The operator is going to sit on the right side, and there's a mobile scanning unit on the right side because that drawer stack has been removed, freeing up space for the scanning unit. But this is an idealized configuration. It's always interesting to me, Pat. So here's doctors. We work with them, but they understand four-handed dentistry. This is set up in classic four-handed dentistry equipment and cabinetry positioning.
Fully fledged assisting.
So that's design option 1, and most of you are probably familiar with that. And then about 5 years ago, we just kept running across more and more needs for what we would call a quiet op. We call this operatory design option number 2, but a quiet op, and when we say quiet, we mean a door for privacy, for visual and sound privacy. Well, because of the American with Disabilities Act and door swing clearances, many of you are probably familiar with this. There's things you can do, in meet code. There's things that you can do that don't meet code that you can do in the middle of the night and hope you get away with it. We're not encouraging that. If someone's no, we're not encouraging that. But so this is the easiest, and the short answer is this is the easiest way, probably the cheapest, most cost-effective way. But you take it. So our 10'5" wide operatory holds, but now we've got to increase the depth to about 14.6 to get adequate clearance to come in at the foot end of the room. This is now really a foot entry or side foot entry operatory, where both the operator and the assistant, no matter which hand, which if you're a lefty or a righty, can get around the chair and get into your seated treatment position. So the schematic on the left shows the sizing, the schematic in the middle. That once again is somebody customizing the schematic on the left, creating more storage on the assistant's side. And then the schematic on the right shows how, like we had shown in that idealized plan, Pat, of 7 ops and 3,500 square feet. Well, if we get to the end of a run of an operatory, so if we go that up-sheet operatory with the door on it, we're just trapping corridor. We're just trapping circulation space. And actually, that op is 10.5 wide and it's 17 feet deep because we trapped the corridor. We didn't take any more square footage. Right. And now all of a sudden we have this giant, quiet suite op. So anyone that was maybe, if you're dabbling in implants and you bring in a nurse anesthetist, you need monitoring equipment, you need additional space at the foot end of a chair, it would be great for things like that.
Another trend is for the GP practices bringing in specialists. So they bring in an oral surgeon or they bring in a periodontist. And they want to have access to a space like this that creates privacy and allows for additional equipment or anesthesiologists, et cetera. And that's something that we've been seeing a lot with the GP practices that we've been designing as well.
So we love that op and would highly recommend GPs.
At least,
we would highly recommend dual head entry operatories for ease of access into and out of an operatory. What do we mean by dual head entry? That means we have an access point on the right and the left side of the operatory. That allows, if I'm a right-handed operator, for myself and the assistant to enter the operatory from the right side. The patient has access to the dental chair. My assistant can enter on the left side.
And as the assistant, if I need to retrieve an instrument during a procedure, it's very easy for me to get up and leave the room.
And if you can imagine, if the assistant, if that opening is not there, the assistant would be forced to come in this way, walk all the way around the foot end of the dental chair to reach the assistant position. If I remove this opening, if I'm the doctor or operator, I'm forced to come in that entry point, walk all the way around the chair, come back over here to my seated treatment position. So for general practitioners, we would never recommend a single head entry operatory. We would always recommend dual head entry for all general practitioners for the majority of their treatment rooms. Now that we've established that dual head entry is the most efficient way to get into and out of the operatory, let's talk about delivery units. So delivery units deliver things like compressed air, vacuum, power, multiple accessories that allow you to efficiently provide dental services. So for example, this is a unit manufactured by Midmark. This is the Pro Center left-right unit. So it swivels around the chair in either direction. So it'll support right-handed operators or left-handed operators. And there's a huge upside to this when you're in the seated treatment position, because you can bring the unit right in front of you. All your hand pieces, all your accessories are right in front of you. One of the challenges of a chair-mounted doctor's module is I'm gaining access into the operatory. And for example, here, coming to a side cabinet to wash my hands, I have to make sure that this unit is pre-positioned properly to keep this pathway open along here. So there's a huge upside ergonomically with this. There's a little bit of a challenge when you're getting access into and out of the operatory. But if I come over here, wash my hands, I can greet the patient for the first time. There's a huge psychological upside for a patient to see the doctor wash their hands. It's very important that early on in the process that you make a determination about what delivery unit combination is best for your needs. So in this operatory, we have what we call split delivery. The doctor or operator's module is split off from the assistant's module. So here's my doctor's module, operator's module, chair mount attached to the base of the dental patient chair. Here's my assistant's module, which is attached to a flexible 12 o'clock work surface, which is in turn mounted on a 12 o'clock cabinet. So this happens to be the Midmark Synthesis series, a very durable unit. Will take all kinds of abuse over the years and uphold and work well for you. I think it has a steel substructure to it. But so the delivery unit combination is split delivery. Chair mounted doctor, operator module, assistant mount on a 12 o'clock work surface. So for hygienists, they especially love this type of module because they're hand pieces and they can have their instrument tray right here, their scalers or root planers. All of that stuff can be right here in front of them, all of that instrumentation right in front of them. There's really easy access back to the oral cavity. I'll show you that here in a minute when we sit down at the dental patient chair. So we now have a different delivery unit configuration for you to consider. So remember, we were just in that previous operatory where we had a split delivery unit configuration where the doctor's module was attached to the base of the chair and the assistant's module was attached to a flexible 12 o'clock work surface which was in turn attached to a 12 o'clock cabinet. In this delivery unit option, we now have the doctor's module attached to the same flexible 12 o'clock work surface that the assistant's module is attached to. So there's a couple of big advantages to doing this. One is the doctor's module, which contains your hand pieces, is no longer in front of the patient where the patient can view that module. So especially pediatric dentists love this option. They don't want the kids to reach out and grab a handpiece. They don't want the kids necessarily to even see the hand pieces. The second huge upside to this delivery unit configuration is the pathway. The pathway on the right side of the chair, for example, in the previous operatory, where I had to pre-position the doctor's module to get to the sink to wash my hands, that pathway is now completely clear. So the pathway is clear. If I bring in mobile units, I have a clear pathway. There's a huge upside to that. Here in a second, I'm going to sit down at the chair, though, and I'm going to show you some of the ergonomic challenges of having the doctor's module attached to the flexible 12 o'clock work surface. Now that I'm in the seated treatment delivery position, it becomes more obvious what the ergonomic challenges are of flexible dual function rear delivery. So now instead of having the doctor's module directly in front of me like I had with the split delivery option, I now have the doctor's module to the left of me, actually to the side of me. So ergonomically, if I'm going to retrieve my hand pieces from the doctor's module, I'm left with sort of this alternative. I come back under the headrest, I'm looping the tubing back around to get to the oral cavity. Once I'm in the oral cavity, it's fine. I have good ergonomic access. I can do all the things I would like to do with a handpiece. But as soon as I return that handpiece back to the holder on the doctor's module, it's a bit of an awkward transition to get back over there. So pediatric dentists love this, like I said, because the doctor's module is not in view of the child. They can't reach out and grab it. They don't see it. It helps relax them. And in pediatric dentistry, there's not maybe some of the higher level of operative procedures where you're just working with a lot of hand pieces. So ergonomically, there is a challenge to that. But once again, we still have the same assistance module attached to the flexible 12 o'clock work surface, which is in turn attached to, in this example, a mid-mark synthesis 12 o'clock cabinet. We still have this is a mid-mark Elevance chair with an integrated armrest for patient comfort, the same articulated headrest that gives us multi-positioning flexibility. So we'd really encourage you in the design process to make a choice on which delivery unit configuration is best for you early on in the process to get it in your drawings and make sure there's no utility implications or misses later on during construction. So our main two options, once again, split delivery where the doctor's module is attached to the chair. It's great ergonomically when you're in the seated treatment position. It creates pathway challenges because that delivery unit sits in the pathway on the operator's side of the dental chair, or dual function flexible rear delivery where you hide the hand pieces from patient view, but you introduce ergonomic challenges because you're torquing or turning to one side or the other to retrieve your hand pieces. Those are your two options. Like some people have said over the years, there's no perfect delivery unit configuration, but these are two great options we would highly recommend. We would not recommend what is called side delivery, that a doctor's module where it's placed on one side of the operatory or the other. It totally one-sides the room. It's not ambidextrous, and you're eliminating 20% of the population from using that particular room. So we would encourage you to make those decisions as soon as you can.
So Pat, how many times did I say huge upside in that video?
Because it was a huge
12.
upside.
Well, there was well, so hopefully that was helpful. So let's talk more about our design follows the dentistry. So Pat, you've said this many times. You know, we don't create something really cool and hope we can put a dental office in it. No, the design follows the dentistry. Dentistry drives the design of a facility. So there's some interesting things going on. So remember I said earlier, we're seeing some trends. We're seeing some interesting trends occurring. So look at this black and white photo in the upper right-hand corner. So when I was a kid, my dentist, Dr. George Wymira, a wonderful man. So he practiced from probably mid-1950s to about, I think, 1985-ish. So he stood up the whole time. He had a Ritter belt-driven handpiece for a long period of time. But so look at here's our guy in the upper right-hand corner. So George stood up, and that's not a great position to spend your life in, treating patients. But the patient sat up. And I remember my dad telling me, George was a great athlete in high school. He was a golfer, but as he got older, my dad said, well, he's a great athlete. He just can't swing that hard because he has a bad back from dentistry. So it was kind of known then that, dentists had bad backs. They had neck and back issues even back in the 60s. So sit-down dentistry, so in the lower right-hand corner, sit-down dentistry, four-handed dentistry, all the stuff I was trained at in dental school in the 70s was supposed to fix all that. Pat, it was supposed to fix the back and the neck and all the rotational and the torquing and the class 4 movements. It was supposed to fix that. Well, now here we are in 2022, and we're running across a whole series, especially younger doctors. They're starting to stand up again. They're standing up again, but it's the picture image on the left, our larger picture on the left, where we have a 6'4" doctor standing up, but now the patient's reclined. So we've gone from the patient sat up, the doctor stood up, to the patient laid down, and the doctor sat down, and now the doctor's standing up and the patient's laying down. So we were exploring every possible option. And I don't blame people for doing it because the sit-down dentistry, the four-handed dentistry that was so heavily promoted when I was in school and when I practiced, it's not. It's not working. No, but Pat, it's not working to a high enough degree. It's not. It never did, or people would have picked up on it more. So I get discouraged. People don't understand it, but the reason they don't understand it, it wasn't as effective, I think, as people wanted it to be, and it didn't resolve those issues. So we're in a transition phase where I don't know if everybody's going to stand up at some point, but at that entrance, that image on the left, we have the big tall doctor, that looks great, but putting a 5'1" assistant in there next to a 6'4" doctor standing up, and you're going to have all kinds of issues. That assistant's not going to be able to see on the oral cavity. You're going to have to stand on a platform or something. But there's just, for all of you out there, we're in sort of a transition period. So the design, nothing's happened hugely to the design yet that we're going to change everything. But we're seeing things happening that are just a very interesting transition. So actually, here's a video. So here's a video of me talking about four-handed dentistry. I'll spare you listening to me on this video, my nasal, whiny voice on this video. But so myself and others for 40 years have promoted, have been taught, have worked in four-handed dentistry, where if you look at me in this video, everything is really set up around the assistant. So this is split delivery. Yes, that's for me, the operator. I'm reaching back the assisting surface. That's for the assistant. See the assistant surface there? So the assistant is handing me instrumentation, and then that side cabinet on the left, is totally for the assistant. So I see operatory after operatory, Pat, where to save space, they have like a 9-foot wide operatory. They put a side cabinet on the operator side, on the right side, which is no use to the operator in the seated treatment position, other maybe than to wash their hands. But it's a lack of understanding that. So let's look at more examples of this. So, design follows the dentistry. Here's our doctor, Dr. Laura. So Dr. Laura's 5'1". Her husband's 6'7", was a former NFL center for the Cowboys and the Minnesota Vikings. But so look at Laura, and so in the off on the left, that's design option number 2, operatory option number 2, 10.5 wide, 14.6 deep, but surrounded. So we have a 12 o'clock console behind her, a side cam. So Laura's 5'1", her assistant's maybe 5'3", and there she has a lab guy. So she's actually placing implants. So the lab guy, you can see his foot pedal on the floor there. He's grinding on a provisional on that side cabinet. But that sort of works. And Pat asked her, how much do you stand up? So what?
75% of the
time. So she's smaller. That's not so bad. But if Laura was 6'4", and that chair was much higher, it's gonna create some issues. So if you look at the image on the right, on the lower right corner, there's Pat, who claims to floss regularly, getting a DO on 20 from Laura. But look at Laura's position. She's standing. She's 5'1". Her assistant's maybe 5'3", 5'4". It's okay, but Laura's shoulders are elevated. I mean, that's an okay position, but to be in that's not any better than being seated. That's not being in it. She still has class 4 shoulder elevation. And then the upper right-hand corner, that just shows, we did all this trouble to create reclining dental chairs to sit down to teach people the seated treatment position. But if you're in a funky position like that, you introduce all kinds of musculoskeletal issues, hunching forward. So you look at the little red spots, and those people are still going to, have some of those repetitive stress injuries. So if, for example, people were to stand up, let's say everybody, Pat next year stands up, well, we would raise cabinetry, we would raise side cabinets maybe to 34 inches because we can't go any higher because of ADA, but even a couple of inches. Side cabinets are really meant for people seated down, scooting around in stools for the majority of a procedure, that working plane height. So for all of you out there, just keep in mind, I don't know how many of you are standing up now. Some of your younger doctors may be standing, and you're looking for a way to avoid, the musculoskeletal issues that dentists have had, traditionally over the years. We don't blame you for doing it. I just think we're in a phase where we don't quite know right now. We don't know right now what's the best alternative for that.
And before we close, we want to talk a little bit about sterilization area too. So sterilization has to be talked about for a couple of reasons. One is it's typically undersized. It's typically not well designed unless you get some support from your equipment supplier or someone who can walk you through that process. And we understand why, because you do not work as the dentist provider. You do not work in the sterilization area. So as a result, you're not going to have a lot of conversation or a lot of opinions one way or another about it. So we want to emphasize that this is very strategic and important, especially to your patients. So when we're designing, we want to see that sterilization area central to all the operatories. So when I say central, I want to have it about 2 to 3 operatories of walking distance away. If you get much farther than that, we're starting to become inefficient. And that's another reason for the floor plan that you saw where we had the L and the mirrored L. That's the reason we have 2 entries into that sterilization area. So any assistant accessing that sterile area is not going to be walking any more than 3 operatories away. We also want it to be a patient view space. We have more and more sterilization areas where we're putting glass or definitely giving patients a view into that space. They want to know that you're taking good care of them and that you are sterilizing instruments and that it's clean, neat, tidy, and it has a process in mind when they walk by. Because what is really key in designing the sterilization area is the linear feet of counter. We showed you in that compromise plan they had probably maybe 10 feet. There's no way in 10 feet, even with stacking sterilization or sterilizers, that you can get a nice flow that allows you to go from dirty to clean very effectively and efficiently. So we want to prevent cross-contamination. We've got this little video to show you a little more information perhaps you don't have right now about the sterilization area.
Approximately 2 million people develop a healthcare-acquired infection each year in the U.S. These types of infections can have devastating health and financial implications. Worse, they can be deadly. Instrument processing is a critical part of your infection prevention protocol. The CDC outlines 5 critical steps of instrument processing: receiving, cleaning and decontamination, preparation and packaging, sterilization, monitoring, and storage. Following these instrument processing best practices creates a smooth workflow from dirty to clean, helping contain contamination and maximizing the efficiency of your instrument processing workflow. Step 1. Receiving, cleaning, and decontamination. Reusable instruments, supplies, and equipment should be received, cleaned, and decontaminated in one section of the processing area. It's important to ensure that all instruments, supplies, and equipment are thoroughly cleaned of organic debris prior to sterilization, or sterilization will be ineffective. Step 2. Preparation and packaging. After cleaning, instruments should be rinsed and dried thoroughly. Sterilization may be compromised if instruments are not dry. Once cleaned and dried, instruments and other supplies should be inspected, assembled into sets or trays, and wrapped or packaged for sterilization using approved autoclavable packaging materials. Step 3. Sterilization. The sterilization area should include the sterilizer and related supplies with adequate space for loading, unloading, and cool down. The CDC recommends using steam sterilization whenever possible on all critical and semi-critical items that are heat and moisture resistant, even when not essential to prevent pathogen transmission. Step 4. Monitoring. Use physical, chemical, and biological monitoring as required by local, state, and federal regulations to ensure the effectiveness of the sterilization process. Records of physical, chemical, and biological indicators of sterilizer performance should also be documented by either print or electronic means. These records must be organized, stored, and be accessible for a certain period of time as required by local, state, and federal regulations. Step 5. Storage. The storage area should contain space for sterile items and disposables. Supplies and instruments should not be stored under sinks or in other locations where they may become wet or damaged. If a sterilized package becomes wet, it will need to be reprocessed before it can be used. We know that you do not want to take chances with the health of your patients and staff or the safety standards of your facility. We can help you create a better healthcare experience. Because at Midmark, we believe better care doesn't happen by chance. It happens by design.
So let's just do a little quick recap here of the clinical zone. So we're looking at a Revit model. So we're going, and that's just a 9'2" by a 12-foot deep operatory that's been customized, so it's basically for hygiene. There's a cabinet on one side. That's not the one I was saying, put the cabinet on the right side. That is for forehand dentistry, but no windows. Remember our operatory design criteria, no windows. We got a big monitor and a slot, but 9-2 wide, 12 feet deep. Head down our operatory corridor. Remember sterilization, there's all kinds of trips in and out of the sterilization area. That's get as central as we can to the office. But a U-shaped sterilization area is the most efficient way in a small amount of square footage. This is a space-efficient office. We couldn't hit our optimal square footage, but U-shaped, dirty breakdown to clean buildup, all the stuff we have in there to take cabinetry to the ceiling to maximize storage. Come across. Here's our design operatory number one, design option one. 10.5 wide, 12 feet deep, split delivery, completely ambidextrous, mirror image side cabinetry, no window, so we got a slot with a monitor in it. We've got some ceiling design going on it to kind of help enhance the experience in there because we don't have natural light. But there's not much you can't do in that operatory. But in a corridor here's actually a variation on a design option number two. The quiet op, this is 9 feet wide. We remove the side cabinetry and we push everything to 12 o'clock. It's more of a corridor. There's another 9'2" wide by 12 foot deep. Hygiene, mostly operatory. A monitor and a slot at the foot end, some coffered ceiling. Come back out this way, another hygiene op. Back to our operatory corridor.
Again, showing you what's possible. You can have the operatory count that you want, but you are compromised on square footage here.
So there's things you can do. So thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciated this opportunity. We'll click it over here to any questions. Adam, did we get any questions or did we get any answers? This says Q&A. Did we get any answers from the attendees? Where we're
well,
headed?
I think
sit down or stand up?
I think you is where the answers come in. No questions yet. There is about a 10-15 second delay, so we'll give it a couple seconds here. I know we were talking beforehand, and you said, with all this design capability, does it differ based on specialty? So I know that's a loaded question, but can you give a very, very brief overview?
Loaded answer. That's a great question. So if there are any specialists out there, it's just specialty specific. So I would say periodontists, for example, that place implants and they have a hygienist and stuff. Their treatment rooms are often very similar to a general practitioner. So the hygienist would be in the operatory design option number one, maybe placing implants in operatory design option number two. That would work perfectly well for that. Oral surgeons, that's quite a bit different. A full-blown surgery out for an oral surgeon is typically is wider. You've got more stuff going on, maybe wider. You've got people at various levels of sedation. When you get into pediatric and orthodontic, we're dealing with bays. There's an interesting thing going on with the bays, Pat. For years we would put dental chairs on 6.5 foot or 7 foot centers in bays, especially ortho where you have a side unit, or pediatric where you don't have any side cabinetry, but you have chairs in an open bay. And a lot of the theory was, if one kid sees another kid behaving and doing well, they'll mirror it. If they see a kid doing poorly, they'll mirror it, and that's do poorly. But with COVID, people were getting a little concerned about, we have to have the 6 foot spacing. Well, for the last several years, we've put all bays at 7 foot spacing. So technically, they're at least 6 feet apart, but people are a little leery about not having some kind of partitioning. So we've done offices where we fully partitioned the bay with partial height walls, with decorative panels that create they're not creating aerosol separation, but they're creating a visual privacy. They're not creating auditory privacy, but it just, people are still debating that, based on people's kind of concerns, how exposed things are. But so ortho, pedo, oral surgery, those are significantly different operatories. Perio, prosthodontists, prosthodontists would have an endo, depending on what type of delivery units you do. We've done at a recent endo, and there's some specialty, carts that are the ASI specialty carts that have their own kind of footprint configurations, but they can be smaller than a traditional GP op. They can be just the same size and make them, much more spacious. The thing about endo, most people are, they're anxious because they probably have a toothache or something's going on. So a little extra space doesn't hurt in those ops. They don't need the layout space like a GP or a prosthodontist, because endos are pretty pretty minimalist in terms of materials and files, but they have some great technology now. The gentle wave is a great piece of technology.
Is that your brief response?
Is that my brief response, Adam? Well,
that was a great response. Thank you. We did get another question in the meantime.
Great.
Can you talk a little more about doors, specifically for HIPAA compliance and infection control? Is it okay to not have them in a general dentist office catering to all ages?
Well, so on operatory, I assume that means on operatories. Obviously, you have doors on toilets,
Yes.
and all private areas. But you don't have to. And for many years, we didn't have. We just in the name of efficiency and flow. And there's no HIPAA thing that says you have to shut a door in a treatment room. There's no HIPAA thing that says even at the front desk. A lot of that for a time there was a concern about the front desk and people would hear stuff. And it just isn't logistically possible really to partition every space that a patient interacts in within a dental facility. But no, there's absolutely no HIPAA requirement in operatories. But you have to be, we would never promote for a time people were put down like a treatment console at 12 o'clock, a treatment console that's 6'2" high, and maybe a center island cabinet, and then run a series of those together. Well, it's just open. It's not so much HIPAA in compliance. It just there's no privacy. You hear doctors and they're whispering, and then you'll get like an especially loud hygienist or assistant. For the entire day, you hear the story what they did for the weekend, and it wafts through the entire office because everybody can hear. But technically, you don't have to do that. But we love. We think in this day and age of COVID and HIPAA, you can never err too much on the side of privacy.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think to answer a question, did you get choked up?
I got choked up at that.
Are you all right? Okay.
Sorry.
So, but I would say that when we talk about design solutions, we always talk about what is your chief concern. And so in the operatories, when you ask a question about that, I heard two things. One was sound and the other was the aerosols, or if you will, the bacteria that might be flying around the space, and would a door make a difference? Well, a door is going to help, and a door is certainly something that would be a solution for somebody who's concerned about sound. But there are other surfaces as well that can help mitigate the sound. So it's a conversation we have with any dentist about their ability to work in an environment that isn't soundproof. And if you really are concerned about sound, that's when we start talking about how we can privatize 1, 2, or even more operatories and what you can do legitimately to do that. There are solutions out there that I've seen, and we've done some of them ourselves, barn doors which slide over the operatory that give you visual privacy, but they really don't close the space. They stand out from the wall, so they're not giving you really auditorial closure, of the operatory. But it does make some doctors feel better that they have the option to pull a barn door and give themselves some visual privacy. So I think that's an excellent question, and I think it's always a conversation to be had that if I'm really concerned about sound, or I'm really concerned about the aerosols or the COVID issues, then we have a conversation about what we can do to the level that we can do it and be compliant with doors.
And I think it still goes back to square footage. So I would be surprised. Most of the people with the biggest complaints about no privacy are in condensed spaces. Yes. Or just like the 7 ops and 2,100 square feet, everything is condensed and pressed against each other, and there's not separations. There's no separation between the zones, but ops that are smallish in size and not maybe as partitioned as they could be, leads to all of that. So, and then carpet, this carpet's kind of fallen out of disfavor in any kind of option, in any kind of clinical space. But for many years we would carpet labs, we had a lot of carpet in the ops, but it wasn't that wasn't an infection control concern. It was a sound thing. It was a sound thing, and if you drop something, it wasn't going to break.
But it was also because vinyl flooring looked horrible, quite frankly. The vinyl flooring options that were available in the 70s and now what's available now are amazing. So I would say 100% of the time we're putting vinyl flooring down, not laminate flooring, but vinyl flooring down in the operatories, certainly in the lab. It does walk out onto the carpet, but we generally put carpet in corridors because that helps with sound, and it's a non-clinical performing space. So
So all hard floors, hard ceilings, it's an echo chamber.
Yeah.
You got to be really careful.
So-
And it doesn't matter how, even some doors, Pat, some doors, like in pediatric, where we want to actually, quiet room. So it's not enough even to put a door on. You've got to soundproof, going to put bats on top of the ceiling. You got to we soundproof all the walls. We put insulation on all the walls. But sometimes you have to weather strip the doors. I mean,
and there are soundproof doors. They're very
Yeah.
expensive doors, but if it's a huge concern, you can definitely do a soundproof door, which closes the threshold, the jams, and the head condition. And it's an investment door, so you have to really be concerned about sound to invest in a $2,000 door. So, Adam, I think that answers the question, maybe more than anybody wanted, but
That was the loaded answer that Jeff was referring to earlier.
yeah, they probably don't want to ask us any more questions now.
Well, you're in luck because there are no more questions.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Well, thank you. I guess this closes our webinar for this evening.
It's up to Adam. Adam is in
it
charge
Adam
of closure.
Okay.
Yes, I am in charge, but thank you both. Always a fun time getting to spend an hour with you. Thank you to Midmark as well for sponsoring tonight's webinar. We did record. There were a couple questions. We'll get that out to you in the next week or so. There will be a short survey that pops up on your screen as you exit. We appreciate your feedback. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.